If you're smelling toast, that must be me, because it's Toasted Mushroom back with another video. If you're smelling anything else other than toast, that's not me, and you can't prove anything in a court of law. Let's just get back to the video. If you're new to the channel, you'll learn very soon that I love Borderlands, and those of you who have been here already, you'll now find out that once I start talking about something, I can't stop. With Borderlands being my favorite video game series, there's things that I start noticing as I play them again and again. Now, what I'm about to tell you isn't anything super new, but it's something I put together using my 2 brain cells, and I think it makes sense. For some context, I went back to play the first Borderlands as a solo playthrough for the first time in maybe 5 or 6 years, and at the time I started a joint playthrough with my wife of the pre-sequel. This is what got the creative juices flowing and what gave me the idea and knowledge for this video. So, while I was playing the first Borderlands, there was an enemy I found myself fighting that I completely forgot about. The Scythids. These creatures come in many shapes and sizes, but for the most part they look like large slug, cockroach, leech, hybrid type things. Which, as a side note, is super interesting that they reused an idea similar to this concept for the Ratch in Borderlands 3. So why was it a notable thing that it was so full of encounters with them? The answer is because they never show up in another Borderlands game afterward. But why is that? Usually I would say that I get it. There are different parts of the planet with different wildlife, so maybe we just never travel back to the areas where we encounter them. But the problem is that we never see them anywhere again, even in the areas that would have similar climates to where we had met them before. So that got me thinking, what happened to all of them? And why have we not seen them again? I mean, I think about how there are racks in every single game. They're literally only there to be annoying, and they've been there since day one. Even Borderlands 4, which takes place on another planet completely, has wreck equivalents. In the real world, I'm sure that the developers forgot about them, or just decided not to add them back. From what I could see, that's what other people believe online. But in universe, what could be the reason? Then I found my reason in the pre-sequel. And the reason is this. Scythids have gone extinct due to the existence of the Threshers. Whoa. That's a huge accusation to be throwing at one of my favorite creatures from Borderlands. How are you so sure? I don't actually know if anyone has these creatures as their favorite. I've never asked or looked. But I get that it could be an out of their concept for people. I ask that you let me weave you a tale as old as time. A tale called biological competition. In nature, competition is defined as a certain species fighting or competing with each other for the use of natural resources in the area they inhabit. We see this with everything on our planet. Sharks and other fish using the same reefs to lay their eggs, birds using the same trees for their nests, Uncle Bob and that homeless man down the street fighting for the last bite of 3-day-old hot dog. That's never happened to you? Me neither. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, even with Pandora, the planet Borderlands takes place on, being a much harsher environment than the one we have here, it would make sense that organisms that live there also act in a similar manner in terms of competition. We know that Scythids during the events of the first Borderlands game were basically everywhere. You can encounter them in Rust Commons, Trash Coast, the Ludicrous Speedway, the Dull Headlands, and others I'm failing to remember at the moment. We also know that by the time we get to Borderlands 2, the Scythids are almost completely gone, and I'll explain what I mean by that later. So the answer must lie somewhere in the middle. Let's take a look at the side quests we get during the events of the pre-sequel, which I should have explained earlier, is the game between Borderlands 1 and 2, and is set on Elpis, Pandora's moon, rather than Pandora. The side quests we're talking about is called Home Delivery. It's given to you in Concordia at the bounty board by Sir Hammerlock. For those of you who don't know, Sir Alistair Hammerlock is a big game hunter and animal researcher from the planet Hermes. He's seen in Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, and 3, where he usually gives the player character missions involving hunting a certain animal. He's married to Wainwright Jacobs, spoiler for Borderlands 3 if you haven't played it, but him being a gay icon, we stan. For the mission, Hammerlock wants you to travel to Outlands Canyon, into some caves, to find a species called the Threshers. The reason Hammerlock wants us to find some is so that he can study them, but since they are native to Elpis, he cannot get permission to bring them to Pandora legally. He doesn't want to travel to Elpis himself, so he intends for us to illegally smuggle a handful of Threshers to Pandora in order for him to study. The side quest is pretty straightforward. We travel to where he says, proceed to freeze a couple of baby Threshers, then we put them in a rocket and send them to Pandora. The problem that arises is that after the rocket lands, Hammerlock is able to procure the Threshers and decides to feed one. The Thresher, named Terry, that's important, escapes and is released into the ecosystem of the planet rather than keeping them in a controlled environment. This marks the beginning of the downfall of the Scythids. So let's talk a little bit about Scythids and their ability to adapt. We see many different types of Scythids in Borderlands. Fire Scythids, electric Scythids, crawling ones, badass ones, just a large array of different types of species. So that means they're very well equipped to deal with multiple environments with different pressures applied to them. However, while the Scythids are great at adaptation and therefore have a lot of areas they are found in, they are no match for the invasive Threshers. We learn from Hammerlock that the Threshers breed fast. I forget the exact wording, but that's a very important factor when talking about the adaptation of a species. The faster a species reproduces, the more they are able to develop mutations that allow them to survive in different conditions. So the biggest advantage they have over the Scythids is their survivability. Because they are able to reproduce so much, they can adapt to whatever conditions they're placed in. Scythids in the first game are some of the easiest enemies you face during your playthrough. Some of them can become more challenging, but you almost never face one that you have trouble dealing with. It shows they're able to adapt in their surroundings, but not able to grow in terms of their potential. The same cannot be said about the Threshers. Some of the hardest bosses that you face in Borderlands 2 are Threshers. Some notable ones are the Gluttonous Thresher and Terramorphous. Terramorphous? I wonder. This means that while both species have the advantage of adaptability, the speed, durability, and reproduction of cycle of the Threshers far outweighs any other advantages the Scythids must have. This starts to cause the Scythid numbers to start decreasing as both of them start competing for the same resources. The Scythids have no way to get the edge over the Threshers because there is no balances in the ecosystem. Because the Scythids are native to Pandora and the Threshers are native to Elpis, there are no natural predators to the Threshers on Pandora. So now, the Scythids are having to deal with their natural predators as well as another species which is better at adapting to whatever niche it has to for the resources of the planet. Therefore, the numbers continue to decrease, and in just 5 years, the Threshers almost completely wipe the Scythids from the planet. Somebody forgot to tell Hammerlock that this is what happens when you introduce an invasive species to an ecosystem. In fact, he should have already known this. We see many examples, not to such a planetary extent, in our own world. In fact, on our planet, invasive species are cited to be one of the top contributors to extinction for the last 5 years. So then, why does this all matter? Well, in the Borderlands narrative, it really doesn't. There doesn't seem to be any real ecological difference to the planet. Now, to be fair, Pandora isn't a great planet to be on for the most part anyway, but the introduction of the Threshers into the environment has had minimal or unseen planetary impacts as of Borderlands 3. It's possible we might see some changes in Borderlands 4, but that has yet to be determined. It's also largely possible that other factors such as Hyperion/Handsome Jack's terraforming of Pandora have exacerbated the extinction of the Scythids, or even covered up other environmental impacts from the Threshers. We do see 2 pretty large problems that have come out of this so far, though. The first problem is the Scythids have now gone extinct. The second is that threshers will continue to grow if they are not killed. Usually when a species gets too large, they will take up all the resources around them, and that's exactly what we're seeing with threshers that live longer than a certain point. Pteramorphus was one that I mentioned earlier. So while we haven't seen any large planetary effects as of yet, that doesn't mean that any can't come later. There's also one little teeny part that I do need to address. So the reason I keep saying almost brought to extinction in my initial analysis is because Tales from the Borderlands, a game developed by Telltale rather than Gearbox, spoilers by the way, shows that while Reese and Fiona are recounting the events of their adventure, we see that for the last time in the entire series a Scythid scurry past the characters. You can see it right there. There it is. That's it. So the Scythids weren't completely wiped out by the events of Borderlands 2, but a little bit of time afterwards, and by the time we get to Borderlands 3, they cannot be found anywhere. This is where I turn it over to the audience. Do you think this is something that they'll touch in upcoming Borderlands titles? Do you miss the Scythids? When researching for this video, I saw that there are many people who absolutely despise the Scythids when playing. My honest problem with them is those god-awful noises that they make when attacking. I think they were decent enemies, but I like that we've gotten some different designs and different concepts for enemies as the series has gone on. Do you think Scythids have a chance to come back? I don't think they will, but there's definitely a chance of them doing so if the developers decide they like them again. If you're having doubts about my theory, you can also see that in Borderlands 4, threshers have invaded Kairos as well. We learned that in one of the newer trailers coming out. That'll about do it for this video though. I hope you liked it. I appreciate it if you'd leave a comment, a like, and maybe ring that notification bell so that you can be updated in any future videos that come out. I appreciate you coming to see me ramble again. Also, YouTube has been acting a bit weird for me, where it won't show me if people respond to my replies in the comments. So, if you're waiting for me to reply and I haven't yet, I apologize. I'll be on the lookout a lot more. And before you go, I'd like you to remember that if you're not toasted with toasted mushroom, then you're just baked. Sayonara, bitches, I'm out.